Shortly before embarking on my dissertation, I had a career-shaping moment. My colleagues and I are working to beat a deadline on coming up with research questions. One of the best definitions on deadline I received from a lecturer at law school, and the gentleman told us that a deadline is a line that the more you get near to it or the more you get closer to it, the more you die. So that's what a deadline is. And so we knew the urgency, the sense of urgency with which we had to come up with the research questions. I knew previously from my engagement with my seniors that a research question is a foundational moment in the career of a student, in the career of your practice. It is from a research question that you will get an awareness of this is where I can spend the rest of my earthly life doing and exploring. And so I didn't want just to be an ordinary practitioner. I didn't want to go for the usual culprits. I didn't want to go for criminal law, constitutional law, land law, or human rights. These are the most common culprits that every university student, any person at law school goes for, because these are the low-hanging fruits. I wanted something that is going to inform my trajectory in career, and I wanted to differentiate myself. It is always your best interest to differentiate yourself. It is always in your best interest to stand apart. I am a believer that as long as you are in a pool that you can be compared to someone else, you don't exist. There are two important incidents that happened at law school that forever shaped the rest of my career. The first incident happened when I was in second year. And we had a unit in law school called Equity and Trust, and I was interested in trust. Trust is one of the most important elements that every individual should take seriously if you want to put in place mechanisms and measures that will help you pass on generational wealth. Without trust and trust relationships, you cannot pass on to the next generation what you have. And we have a lot to pass on to the next generation. You have your academic projects to pass on to the next generation, your copyrights, your creativity, the things you have developed to pass on to the next generation. So this gentleman, a very proficient, bright lawyer, comes to class. And then he surveys the class for a while. And then he tells us this: ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid I have some bad news. To which we listen intently. And the gentleman says that when he was in Makerere in the 70s, his professor as well came to his class and said that he had observed them and their interaction with him, and he had not seen anyone befitting getting a C. And the professor said, guys, you should not be ambitious. I'm not going to award anyone a C. True to his word, no one got a C. To which this gentleman tells us, guys, don't be ambitious. You cannot expect a B from the brain of someone who was awarded a C. The guy kept to his word. The leading lady got a C, and yours truly got a D plus. So if you look at my academic transcript, you're going to get a D plus in Equity and Trust. The second incident. Prior to going to law school, I had been practicing music. I've been producing music for a while. There is this gig that we had with a German broadcaster that really shifted the rest of my life. So out of this gig, we had an interest to negotiate royalty considerations. But we could not get a lawyer in Nairobi that understood royalties. Secondly, that understood entertainment contracts. So when an opportunity presented itself for me to go to law school, I took it, and I knew that I want to study intellectual property. Specifically, I wanted to understand copyright. So this time comes for me to learn what brought me to law school. I didn't care about constitutional law. I was very good. Majority of my colleagues thought that I would end up a constitutional lawyer or a constitutional judge. But I didn't care about that. All that brought me here was copyright, intellectual property. So this gentleman comes, he takes us on intellectual property. And the gentleman does a brilliant introductory piece for 30 minutes, after which he hands us a reading list. A reading list is a compilation of books that we are going to consider during this time of this unit, and compilation of cases that we are going to go through during this time of this unit. That was the last time we ever had or saw the guy ever. So I have never seen that guy from that day. So these are the two important points in my life that I knew that if I'm going to write a dissertation, I'm going to write a dissertation on trust, which I got a D plus. Or if I'm going to do something that will change the rest of my career, I'm going to do a dissertation on intellectual property, which I had nothing to go by, because besides diving into books, I didn't have that active one-on-one lecture of intellectual property. Long story short, I ended up doing my dissertation on intellectual property, and by the grace of God, I have invented something in the area of intellectual property called proprietary operational capacity thresholds, which stands on three foundational pillars. Pillar number one, the ability to identify the appearance of intellectual property. Intellectual property appears at three levels on an individual, appears at three levels on an organization. The second pillar, the ability to appreciate the identified forms of intellectual property into their corresponding intellectual property assets. There's a huge difference between intellectual property and intellectual asset. The third pillar was the ability to develop utility models that will help an individual exploit assets into building products and value propositions for the marketplace. That is how I ended up practicing something that I was never taught. I ended up being the best in my space, in spaces whereby I didn't have more than 30 minutes of active lectures. It reminds me of a promise that God will use the weak things to shame the strong amongst us. If I knew in my heart all through my law school days, I knew I would end up a constitutional lawyer. I knew I would end up a constitutional judge. I knew I would end up a criminal lawyer. Those are the areas that I'm exceptionally good. But when it comes to intellectual property, the way that I have awareness, the things I identify in intellectual property, even my peers cannot come close. I'm interested to know, how did you end up doing what you're doing today? Whether you're a lawyer, whether you are a doctor, whether you are a farmer, wherever you are, as long as you are engaged somewhere in the fields and in the areas of human endeavor, how did you end up with what you're doing today? What is your story? I would be interested to know how you got to where you get. Sometimes we need to understand that the story behind an individual can help inform the trajectory, but even more importantly, it helps us to begin to appreciate our individual contributions at the marketplace. My name is Ogwang. I am the principal at Franchise and Licensing Institute. We exist to help you identify your intellectual property and help you do things that you have never imagined at the marketplace. I still want to remind you that the School of Negotiation June intake is still ongoing. This is a rare opportunity for you to get 6 basic principles that will turn you into an effective negotiator. Negotiation is a tool that you cannot neglect having in these days as you appear at the marketplace. If there is something I know better than majority of people alive is negotiation. My name is Ogwang. I will see you in the next one. Until then, take care. God bless. And don't forget to register for this school. Bye-bye.